right. Has anybody walking along a street casually looking at someone ahead of him ever seen a human being vanish? It is a common experience to think that one has seen something like this occur. Another common experience, which has been theorized upon by James and other psychologists, is to be somewhere and have an uncanny feeling that though so far as one knows, one was never there before. One, nevertheless, was at some time there. It may be that many persons have been teleported back and forth without knowing it or without having more than the dimmest impression of the experience. But about walking along a street and having a feeling that somebody has vanished, there have been definitely reported observations upon disappearances. In these instances, the explanation has been that someone had seen a ghost and that the ghost had vanished. We shall have accounts that look as if observers have seen, not ghosts, but beings like themselves vanish. In the journal, in the Jure Soc Psycho Research 11-189 is published a story by a painter named John Osborne living at 5 Hurst Street, Oxford, England. He said that about the last of March 1895, he was walking along a road to Wolverton when he heard sounds of a horse's hoofs behind him and turning saw a man on horseback having difficulty in controlling his horse. He scurried out of the way and when safe looked again. Horse and man had vanished. Then came the conventionalization, even though it would be widely regarded as an unorthodox conventionalization. It was said that the week before, a man on horseback had been killed in this part of the road and that the horse, badly injured, had been shot. Usually, there is no use searching for anything further in a publication in which a conventionalization has appeared, but this instance is an exception. In the June number of the journal, there is a correction. It is said that the accident with which this disappearance had been associated had not occurred a week before, but years before, and was altogether different, having been an accident to a farmer in a hayfield. Several persons investigated, among them a magistrate who wrote that he was convinced at least that Osborne thought that he had seen the figures disappear. Well then, why didn't I get a Wolverton newspaper, and even though it would be called a mere coincidence, find noted the disappearance of somebody who had been last seen on horseback? I forgot now why I did not, but I think it was because no Wolverton newspaper was obtainable. I haven't the item, but with all our experience with explanations, I should have the knack myself by this time. I think of a man on horseback who was suddenly transported, but only a few miles. If, when he got back, he was a wise man on horseback, he got off the back of his horse and said nothing about this. Our general notion is that he would have been unconscious of the experience. Perhaps if Osborne had lingered, he would have seen this man and his horse reappear. In the journal SPR 4-50 is the story of a young woman who was more than casually looked at near the foot of Milton Hill, Massachusetts. She vanished. She was seen several times. So this is a story of a place that was haunted and the figure was supposed to be a ghost. For a wonder, there was no story of a murder that was committed years before near this hill. For all I know, some young woman living in Boston, New York, some distant place, may have had teleportive affinity with an appearing point or terminal of an occult current at this hill, having been translated back and forth several times without knowing it, or without being able to remember, or remembering dimly, thinking that it was a dream. Perhaps sometime happening to pass this hill, Perhaps some time happening to pass this hill by more commonplace means of transportation, she would have a sense of uncanny familiarity, but would be unable to explain having no active consciousness of having ever been there before. Psychologists have noted the phenomenon of a repeating scene in different dreams or supposed dreams. The phenomenon may not be of fancifulness, but of a dim impressions of teleportations to one persisting appearing point. A naive little idea of mine is that so many ghosts in white garments have been reported because persons while asleep have been teleported in their night clothes. In Real Ghost Stories, published by the Review of Reviews, English, a correspondent tells of having seen a woman in a field vanish. Like others who have had this experience, he does not say that he saw a woman vanish, but he saw a figure of a woman. You have to excuse me. Allergies are kicking up again. He inquired for some occurrence by which to explain and learned that somewhere in the neighborhood a woman had been murdered and that her figure had haunted the place. In the Proc SPR 10-98, someone tells of having walked with her father upon a sandy place near Aldershot, hearing footsteps, turning, seeing a soldier. The footsteps suddenly ceased to be heard. She turned again to look. The soldiers had vanished. This correspondent writes that her father never would believe anything except that it was a real soldier who somehow got away. In the Occult Review 23-168, a correspondent writes that while walking in a street in Twickenham, he saw walking toward him a figure of a man. The figure turned and vanished or disappeared through a garden wall. This correspondent failed to learn of a murder that had been committed in the neighborhood, but influenced by the familiar convention, mentions that there was an old dueling ground nearby. The most circumstantial of the stories appears in the journal SPR, November 1893. Miss M. Scott writes that upon the afternoon of the 7th of May, 1893, between 5 and 6 o'clock, she was walking upon a road near St. Boswell's, Roxonbyshire, when she saw ahead of her a tall man who, dressed in black, looked like a clergyman. There is no assertion that this figure looked ghostly, and there is a little circumstance that indicates that the figure or the living being was looked at more than casually. Having considerable distance to go, Miss Scott started to run, but it occurred to her that it would not be dignified to run past the stranger, so she stood still to let the distance increase. She saw that the clerical-looking man turned a corner of the road, the upper part of his body visible above a low hedge. He was gone in an instant. Not far beyond this vanishing point, Miss Scott met her sister, who was standing in the road looking about her in bewilderment, exclaiming that she had seen a man disappear while she was looking at him. One of our present thoughts is that teleportations back and forth often occur. There are many records, some of which may not be yarns or may not be altogether yarns, of persons who have been seen far from where, so far as those persons themselves knew where let me start that sentence all over again. There are many records, some of which may not be yarns or may not be altogether yarns, of persons who have been seen far from where, so far as those persons themselves knew they were at the time. See instances of Gurney's Phantasms of the Living. The idea is that the human beings have been switched away somewhere and soon switched back and have been seen away somewhere and have been explained to the perceivers as their own hallucinations. It may be that I can record a case of a man who was about to disappear but was dragged back in time from a disappearing point. I think of the children of Clairvaux who were about to be taken into a vortex but were dragged back by their parents who were not susceptible. Data look as if there may have been a transporting current through so-called solid substance which opened and then closed with no sign of a yawning. It may be that we call substance is as much open as closed. I accept myself that there is only relative substance so far as the phenomenal is concerned, so I can't take much interest in what the physicians are doing, trying to find out what were mere phenomenal substance really or finally is. It isn't, or it is intermediate to existence and non-existence. If there is an organic existence that is more than relative, though not absolute, it may be the substantial, but its iron and lead and gold are only phenomenal. The greatest seeming security is only a temporary disguise of the abysmal. All of us are skating over thin existence. Early in the morning of December 9th, 1873, Thomas B. Cumpston and his wife, who occupied good positions in Leeds, were arrested in a railroad station in Bristol, England, charged with disorderly conduct, both of them in their night clothes, Cumpston having fired a pistol. See the London Times, December 11th, 1873. Cumpston excitingly told that he and his wife had arrived the day before from Leeds and had taken a room in a Bristol Hotel, and that early in the morning the floor had opened, and that as he was about to be dragged into the opening, his wife had saved him, both of them so terrified that they had jumped out the window, running to the railroad station looking for a policeman. In the Bristol Daily Post, December 10th, is an account of proceedings in the police court. Cumston's excitement was still so intense that he could not clearly express himself. Mrs. Cumston testified that early in the evening both of them had been alarmed by loud sounds, but that they had been reassured by the landlady. At 3 or 4 in the morning, the sounds were heard again. They jumped out on the floor, which was felt giving away under them. Voices repeating their exclamations were heard, or their own voices echoed strangely. Then, according to what she saw or thought she saw, the floor opened wide. Her husband was falling into this opening when she dragged him back. The landlady was called, and she testified that sounds had been heard, but she was unable clearly to describe them. Policemen said that they had gone to the place, the Victoria Hotel, and had examined the room, finding nothing to justify the extraordinary conduct of the Cumstons. They suggested that the matter was a case of collective hallucination. I note that there was no suggestion of intoxication. The Cumstons, an elderly couple, were discharged into custody of somebody who had come from Leeds. Collective hallucination is another of the dismal labels by which conventionalists shirk thinking. Here is another illustration of the lack of standards in phenomenal existence by which to judge anything. One man's story, if not to the liking of conventionalists, is not accepted because it is not supported, and then testimony by more than one is not accepted, if undesirable, because that is collective hallucination. In this kind of jurisprudence, there is no hope for any kind of testimony against the beliefs in which conventional scientists agree. Among their amusing disregards is that of overlooking that, quite as truly may their own agreements be collective delusions. The loud sounds in the Cumston case suggest something of correlation with poltergeist phenomena. Spiritualists have persistently called poltergeist sounds raps. Sometimes they are raps, but often they are detonations that shake buildings. People up and down a street have been kept awake by them. Many existences open and shut noisily. From my own experience, I don't know that there ever has been a poltergeist. At least I have had only one experience, and that is explainable several ways. But what would be the use of writing a book about things that we think we're sure of, unless, like a good deal in this book, to show the deuce we are? In the Sunday Express, London, December 5th, 1926, Lieutenant Colonel Foley tells of an occurrence that resembles the Cumstons' experience. A room in Corpus Christi College, Cambridge University, was, in October 1904, said to be haunted. 4 students, of whom Shane Leslie, the writer, was one, investigated. Largely, the story is of an invisible but tangible thing or being which sometimes became dimly visible, inhabiting or visiting this room. The 4 students went into the room, and one of them was dragged away from the others. His companions grabbed him like some powerful magnet. Something was drawing him out of their grasp. They pulled against it and fought in a frenzy, and they won the tug. Other students outside the room were shouting. Undergraduates came running down the stairs and, crowding into the room, wrecked it, even tearing out the oak paneling. Appended to the story in the Sunday Express is a statement by Mr. Leslie. Colonel Foley has given an accurate account of the occurrence. And how do I shut this off?